Welcome to the Food Startups Podcast, connecting the opaque world of food startups.
Hey guys, welcome to our 51st episode, and this is the long-awaited nutrition episode. I looked around for a long time to find someone that would be willing to come onto the show and help guide us to be healthier in terms of what we eat and our lifestyles. Now, it took me a while because the first two companies that were coming on seemed to have an agenda to push their products, which is fine, but it didn't quite go with my philosophy of nutrition. And I found someone who isn't really in the food business, but he's an entrepreneur, and he has a very, very interesting way of seeing the world, as you're going to see. Just his blog, his name is Tynan, Tynan.com. And the way he views life and productivity and fulfillment is really unique. I don't know too many people like Tynan, and I've picked up a lot of habits from him over the years. We don't agree on every single thing when it comes to nutrition, but what I like about his philosophy is it talks about some rules and some, I wouldn't say simple because, let's say cutting out sugar is maybe a simple rule, but following it is really difficult. But he also wrote a book on how to master habits. So the first part of the episode, we're going to talk about how to eat healthier and some tips for eating healthier and what to eat and most importantly, what to not eat. And then talk about overall health and nutrition and how you can change your habits, because we are cognizant of the fact that people don't have 8 hours a day just to dedicate to what they're eating and cooking and so forth. So, creating habits and changing your diet in a way that it doesn't intrude with your lifestyle. So he's going to go over tips on how to change your habits as well. So this is episode 51 on nutrition and health and business with Tynan. All right, so today's guest is Tynan Smith. Like I mentioned to Tynan earlier, this is going to be a very interesting introduction because he has a very diverse and eclectic and unique mix of things that he's done in his life and hobbies, etc. A few years ago, Time magazine named him one of the top 25 bloggers. I met him through his blog, actually, and he came down to Bogota 3 to 4 years ago, and he kind of helped change the way I viewed nutrition and what truly is healthy. So he's very healthy. He doesn't drink. He's written a book, and he's lived out of an RV in San Francisco. He was in a famous book by Neil Strauss called The Game, which was about, I guess it was kind of like ways to pick up women in LA, strategies and the psychological game behind it. Really a great book. He also invested in an island off the coast of Canada with a bunch of friends. Tynan, how's it going? And if you could add in some cool things that I missed to your profile.
Yeah, sure. Doing well. Good to talk to you. Yeah, what else? I write a bunch of books. I travel a ton. I travel probably 6 or 7 months out of the year now, a lot to Asia and to Europe. But in general, I just try to kind of find optimal things to do in life or things that other people aren't doing so much, and I try to explore them and share them with other people and use them in my own life.
Right on, yeah. And at his website tynan.com, you can see what we're talking about, and he's got tons and tons of blog posts, and he links to his books. So Tynan, to start off this episode, I want to refer to a blog post which is linked on our website on foodstartupspodcast.com. That's called A Practical and Sane Guide to Eating Healthy. And I believe it was actually in the forum page, not even a main blog post. And, I'm going to pull out one sentence from here and quote, "Cut out sweeteners, substitute whole grains for refined grains, switch to healthy oils and well-raised animals." Now, can you take us through each of these 3 changes and say why it's beneficial for your health?
Yeah, so the first thing is that there's a million different ways you can improve your diet, but if you do those, you got 80% of nutrition down. So that's why I focus on those 3. Sweeteners are the worst thing you can possibly have. I mean, they're bad calories, but also they're, refined sweeteners kind of trick your liver into producing too much insulin, and it's something that we were never meant to digest. And so I'd say refined sweeteners are probably the biggest cause of being overweight, being unhealthy, mood swings, stuff like that. And when I cut those out in particular, that was by far the biggest personal change I noticed. And, there's always these agave nectar and like all these other ones. And it seems like one by one, they sort of get knocked down where it's like, oh, well, it was healthier on this one axis, but it turns out, and when you look at this other factor, it's not good. So just kind of like a simple way is just don't eat anything. Don't eat any sweeteners. That's what I do. Fruit is sweet and that's good. Natural sweetness is fine, but refined sweeteners seem to just one by one be discovered as being bad things. Whole grains versus refined grains is essentially the same thing. It's just the refined carbs that our bodies were never meant to digest. And, it's a pretty easy switch, especially if you're cooking for yourself. I think the whole grains tend to taste better anyway. But that's very,
just for listeners that aren't aware, give us an example of some refined grains.
Okay, so there's white flour would be the biggest one. There's white rice. When you do oats, you can have like the whole oat groat, or you can have like the super compressed 1 minute oats. And there's actually like a difference between those. In general, you want to have your grains. Then there's some like quinoa, which are, I think, never come refined. They're only whole grains. So yeah, you always want to have the refined version of those things. And then oils and well-raised animals are actually basically the same problem. And that's, there's a lot of little things, but the big one is your omega-3 versus omega-6 fats. And you're supposed to have, I don't remember the exact number. I think it's like a 3-to-1, 6-to-3 ratio or something like that. But the average person, when they're eating poorly raised animals and unhealthy oils, there's going to be, 10-to-1 or 20-to-1 or something like that. So for oils, I personally only eat olive oil cold. I don't cook with it, but for like salad dressing. And then for cooking, I like coconut oil a lot. And then I'll also do grass-fed butter and stuff like that. So well-raised generally means pasture-raised, grass-fed, where the animal's eating its original intended diet.
Right on. Okay. And some follow-ups there. So you mentioned quinoa, and I think the answer may be yes, but just to confirm, do you eat other ancient grains like kamut and barley? And kamut, which is Khorasan wheat, does have gluten. So I know I have a pretty strong positive association with kamut, but I was curious if you have ever had that.
Yeah, I've had both of those. I like them, but part of what I do with my personal diet is just to keep things simple. I eat almost the same thing every single day. And so I just don't cook with those just because it's not part of my 2 little meals I eat every day. But I do like them, and they're definitely healthy, good things to eat, I think.
And what are the 2 meals you eat every day?
For lunch, I do 2 sandwiches. I do a sardine sandwich, wild caught. Well, all sardines are wild caught, but bristling sardines, which are some really good ones from the coast of Scotland. I like the brand Crown Prince in water, so just whole sardines with the bones and skin on. And then I put some hummus on there. I use Ezekiel bread, which actually has like a lot of these whole grains, probably some of those ancient grains too. I think they have barley at least. And then I do some hummus, the sardines, and then some greens, so either spinach or kale or mix. And I also do another sandwich of light skipjack tuna from Wild Planet. They have really, really low mercury tuna that tastes pretty good. And then for dinner, I just go to Chipotle. Again, a bowl there. No, none of the refined grains of the burrito wrapper.
Gotcha. Now, a question for you, and I'd seen something on Food Babe, and I realized you can't be perfect. I think we had talked about this, try to keep to a pretty strict diet when I'm in Bogota, but when you're traveling, it's a lot easier or I should say it's a lot harder to maintain because a lot of times, especially if you're in a remote place, you just don't have access to some of these healthier foods. But I wanted to talk to you about Chipotle. Do you have any preoccupations or apprehensions about their ingredient control?
I mean, I don't think it's a 10 out of 10. I think it's the best possible, easily accessible food you can get that's prepared, especially at a reasonable cost. And it's very, very hard to eat a perfect diet. I mean, even eating the same thing every day isn't perfect. Like, it would be better to have some more variety. But you've got to factor your diet into your life, and it can't be your entire life. I've been through phases where it was like a huge part of my life, and I found that's not a good balance, at least for me. But what I like about Chipotle is that they really, really do care. Like, they really, make an enormous effort where they kind of don't have to have high quality stuff. Like, a lot of things are organic, like the cilantro, where like nobody really cares, but they do it anyway. And they put a sign up when they don't have the high quality pork that they normally have. So I think it's pretty good. I think it's like an 8 out of 10, somewhere like that. It's also, you get a lot of food for a small amount of money, and it's very fast. So in terms of kind of having a good balance between not being too expensive, fitting into the day pretty easily, and being healthy, I think it's great.
Right on. Okay, now I want to go into a couple more yes or no questions, and we'll get into overall health here because, as you know, it's not just what you eat, but your lifestyle, et cetera, et cetera. So a couple things. One, do you take any supplements? And if no, would you be or I should say, if not, would you be open to them in the future?
I don't. So the only supplement I've ever taken is vitamin D. I got tested, had really low vitamin D, and then actually I should probably still be taking it. That was when I was like not leaving my RV. I was just working constantly. So I think I have probably better vitamin D levels now, but I'm open to it. I feel like it's like a pretty poor substitute in general for just eating good food. And so my first inclination would be to alter my diet to make up for the difference. With vitamin D, I just couldn't get outside enough. I wasn't in a very sunny place. I was working a lot. So I kind of made that compromise. So I'm open to them, but I prefer to just get things from whole food sources, because I think there's also a lot of times other ingredients, other aspects of the food that work well in conjunction with the vitamin you're supplementing. So I think it's just a better idea in general to get it from whole foods.
Yeah, and the thing with supplements, it's so hard to... I've gone through periods where I took a lot of supplements. I'm still interested in creatine because I know it's hard to get a lot of creatine from like a diet.
I do take creatine, actually. I totally forgot about that one. Yep. I was thinking pills, but I do creatine and whey powder before workouts.
Okay, and do you take it in creatine powder or in the pill form?
Powder.
Okay. No, that's cool. Yeah. But I guess a lot of other supplements, right? There's so many if you read like the 4 Hour Body, and the control over the manufacturing, you can never really know, right? There's no way you can taste, or you can't really taste it anyway, right? But there's no way you can consume the supplement and say, okay, this was a well-made supplement or not. And I actually have a book, Tynan. It's I'll link to it on the podcast. It's like nutritional supplements as reviewed by like health professionals. And I was surprised to see that Safeway has a lot of brands. So they have like Kroger, Randall's, but I think a certain Safeway multivitamin was number 2, and that was by far the cheapest one on there. And there were some like super exclusive ones that they sell in Beverly Hills that their bioavailability was like very low and everything. So yeah.
Interesting.
Okay, moving on. And now, especially since I'm talking to you in Las Vegas and it's about to be summer. I mean, what's the temperature today in Las Vegas?
I think it's like mid 80s right now. Very sunny.
Wow, great weather. So do you wear sunscreen?
I do not wear sunscreen. I've read enough about it. I don't know for sure. I'm definitely not a sunscreen expert, but there's like enough things I've read about it that scare me, so I don't do it. I also found, and I don't know if this is coincidence, I don't know what the deal is. I feel like in the past, before I ate healthy, I used to get sunburned very easily. I feel like now that I eat healthy, I almost never get sunburned. It might be coincidence. I might be, backwards rationalizing. I don't know. But, I went on a 2-hour hike in the desert the other day, 2 days ago, didn't get sunburned in the least. And I read something once about the omega-3 to 6 ratio that apparently helps. Don't know for sure, but I also think about doing coconut oil for sunscreen. I've heard that it blocks, I think, 1/8 of the sun, so it's like a very low SPF, but that it also basically repairs all the damage that the sun causes. So I like that idea. I just never happen to have it around.
So I'll relate a story back to you, Tynan. And just so you know, listeners, Tynan has an awesome website called cruisesheet.com, and he kind of introduced me to getting like great deals on cruises. So last year, I'm not sure if you've heard of red palm oil. It's like it's not like coconut, it's another palm oil. It has a lot of vitamin A and you can use it for cooking. The downside is it stains everything in its path. It's like worse than, it's like blood. I mean, I can't, but so anyway, on the cruise, I said one day, I think it's SPF 15, that's right, it's really high. So I put that on, basically painted myself red, but like at least 1 hour, like off the coast of Nicaragua in like full sun. At dinner, after taking a shower and getting the oil off, I was a lobster. It didn't quite work. But
interesting.
Yeah. But then again, that's really extreme. And also, the part about it say that sometimes that radiation can be good for you, that sunlight can give you vitamin D, natural vitamin D, right? And then another interesting thing, I was watching the Random Show with Tim Ferriss one time. I'm not sure if you heard of astaxanthin, which is I guess it's naturally occurring in krill and in krill oil, but they have astaxanthin supplements, and he took a high dose for about 2 weeks, and apparently it worked really well for him. I used to take astaxanthin after seeing the episode and go in the sun, but at best it was like an antidote that it worked. But I'm starting to feel the same way about sunscreen, and I think especially in the lower price sunscreens, if I had the money to pay like $120 for like the best sunscreen, I may feel better. You go to the beach or go to like a gas station to buy sunscreen, whatever those top brands are, I have a lot of distrust for those brands as well.
Yeah, I think as a general rule, we're going to look back at this time, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, and be kind of blown away at the stuff we put on our bodies and the things we put in our bodies. So that's why vitamin D is the only pill I've swallowed. That's why I don't do the sunscreen or any sort of lotions or anything. I use like Dr. Bronner soap. I just think, probably most of them are actually fine, but a few of them are not going to be, and we aren't going to be able to figure out which ones are or aren't. So that's why I stay away from these things.
Right on. And have you read Anti-Fragile?
No, so many people love his books, and I tried to read The Black Swan, and I just found his writing style just unbearable. But it's me, everybody else likes it, but I don't know, I couldn't get through it.
I gotcha. Yeah. Oh, he talks a lot about the phenomenon of putting so much faith in something that has, just because it hasn't been proved, and it's not dangerous because it hasn't been proved. Right. Dangerous. So things that aren't natural, things that we haven't been doing for 3,000 to 4,000 years, he's very skeptical towards those things as well. And this kind of leads me into my next point. He talks about fasting a lot in his book. And starting last year, I go at least, I'd say, one day a month where either usually 24, sometimes 36 hours, I don't eat at all, just water. And listen, I mean, I've read some studies from Berkeley, but to be fair, they're way over my head, and I can't explain why in like a scientific way, but the idea of it's like thinking of your body as a machine and letting your liver and your kidney kind of regenerate themselves, not having to work to process food and kind of focus on themselves. And the thing that Taleb talks about in Anti-Fragile is the misconception of the Mediterranean diet, which is that they don't pay attention to the frequency, right? Because they weren't eating well-balanced meals, right? With like a salad, protein, and a grain, right? They may not eat for 2 days, and then they would eat a bunch of fish, or et cetera, et cetera. So just kind of the variations, and that's what the whole book is about. I'd say I'm a big fan of regular fasting. I'll mention one more thing before I let we hear your opinion on it, is ketosis, which I heard on another podcast the other way. There's some studies that have came out, I think from MIT, and ketosis is where your body has high fat, medium protein, and almost no carbs. And like, I guess bulletproof coffee would be one way to do it in the morning, but the best way to get there is to fast for at least like 3 days with just water. And they're starting to show, or some people believe, I should say, we'll leave it this way. Some people believe that cancer is a metabolism problem. So if you, instead of using glucose, if you use fat, that's what ketosis is, burning fat for energy instead of glucose. If you do that, you kind of drain out the energy source of cancer cells. So what's your take on intermittent fasting, regular fasting, ketosis? Have you tried any of these things?
So I know very, very little about them. In fact, I think you probably told me more about them just now than I knew before. But I do actually do intermittent fasting. For the longest time, I had trouble putting on weight. I tried to gain muscle just working out, did the 4-hour body thing, and none of it really worked for me. I got a friend of mine named Dick Talons. He's one of the founders of a startup called Photocracy. And he suggested intermittent fasting for putting on muscle. And he said, I've done the research, it's healthy. So I started doing that. That's why I only eat those 2 meals, not 3 meals. And I love it. I don't know that I've noticed any health difference necessarily, but I love that I don't have to think about breakfast in the morning. It just makes life very easy. So if there's benefits beyond that, that's even better. But I find it's just, you get used to it very quickly, and it's really convenient.
And what hours of the day do you eat?
So I typically eat lunch around 1, and then I eat my dinner usually 8:30 or so. So I have approximately 8-hour window.
Yeah, so you're doing 16 hours every day. Yeah. Without, okay, cool. Well, listen, Tynan, I appreciate your perspective on diet and health. I want to go to the second part of the show, which is about habits. You wrote a book, which I do recommend, on habits, and I read that, I think did it come out last year or the year before?
Came out last year, yeah, in September, October, something like that.
Great, and it's called Superhuman by Habit. So, Tynan, I know this is not something that you went to a month, all of a sudden you're healthy. You had to make a lot of changes, and I know you used to be vegetarian, now you're not, so you had to kind of make a lot of changes, right? Yeah. So do you think you could do an overview of breaking down, especially with the big 3 we talked about, the sweeteners, the healthy oils, and well-raised animals? How does someone go about changing their habits successfully?
I think the big thing to keep in mind that people don't think of at first is that you're really trying to fix your health for 5 years down the road, not next month. You're not trying to lose 5 pounds this month. You're trying to be like in peak physical shape in like 5 years. And so a lot of times when people go on these diets or whatever, it's like really difficult to stick to. It's not sustainable. It's like really jarring to their lifestyle. It can consume their lives. And so what happens is they do it for, half a year, a few months, whatever. And then they just go back and they get in the cycle where they try, they fail, they go back to eating unhealthy. So, with habits in general, I've always found it's the best way to get sustainable habits, which is really the name of the game, is to do the smallest possible habit and do it every single day without fail. And then once it becomes easy, you do the next one. And so with eating healthy, the biggest thing is you just cut out sweeteners. Like, do that first. Just say, I'm not going to eat any sugar. I'm not going to eat anything that I know has sugar in it or I suspect has sugar in it. And maybe the same for honey and stuff like that. But generally, sugar is the real problem. And so some decisions are easy. It's like, do I eat this cookie? No. Do I eat this pasta sauce? Well, probably has sugar in it, but maybe that's okay. You can just eat it. So you do that for a few months and you get used to it. So you're cutting out desserts. You're cutting out crappy breakfast sort of things like cereals, like cornflakes or, whatever with added sugar. And then from there, I'd say like, okay, now let's be like a little bit more hardcore about it. I'm not going to purchase anything I'm going to look at the ingredients for every single thing in my house. And if it has sugar, I'm not going to have it. And so then you have to start getting rid of pasta sauce because a lot of it has a little bit of sugar and stuff like that. From there, I'd switch to oils. I feel like that's a pretty easy one. I actually will sometimes like Chipotle uses, I think, soy oil and canola oil, which I'm not crazy about, but I'll still eat those sometimes. And then same with the animals. I think you really want to control 100% for what comes into your house. And then when you eat out or whatever, be, as strict as you can and be reasonable, because if the habit doesn't fit into your life, if it doesn't feel like part of your life rather than imposition on your life, you're not going to stick with it. And so it's better to have an 80% good diet or a 90% good diet forever than it is to have a 100% good diet for 6 months and then go back to like a 20% good diet. And so I think it's just important to realize like a lot of people have done these changes. It's really not that hard. It's a little bit daunting at first, but you go small. You could even say, I'm going to cut out half the sugar, or I'm going to take out all the sugar except for sugar in my coffee or whatever. Just whatever it is for you that you can do. You do that one at a time until you're consistent with it. Then you increase.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I think this 5 years, not 5 months mindset applies to a lot of different things like physical fitness, starting a business, right? Because, especially
Absolutely.
when you're young, right? At least for me, and, I could blame it on American culture, et cetera, et cetera. But the reality was I was just all about the get rich quick. Like, oh man, I'd love to be making like $10,000 a month on month 2 of the business. And you kind of get humbled by some failures as you get older and more experienced, right? But it becomes about those 5 years or even 10 years, right? And, a great example is, I think, in physical fitness is I have a buddy who told me, he's like, listen, Matt, here's what I do for physical fitness. And he's really good with like bar stars, like, the pull-up bars and all that type of stuff. And he's like, I go to the gym once every 5 days without fail. And then I go running once every 6 days without fail. Like I tell a lot of people that, oh dude, that's not enough. But they have that mindset. It's like, okay, it's time to get healthy. We're going to the gym 3 to 4 times a week, like they used to do in high school or something. And they do that. And maybe they do it for 2 months and they do get, pretty jacked or in good shape. But then they just don't do it for 3 to 4 years. And then they're overweight and then they don't have the confidence and it's a mess because when they think of going back to the gym, they don't think about doing it once every 5 days, which you may be able to fit into your lifestyle. They think about going to the gym, 4 1.5 hour sessions, which is a huge imposition on your time, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So I love that. Habits that you say you're going to do for 5 to 10 years, they don't have to be so impressive. I'm going to meditate for 2 minutes every day for 5 years, and that's a huge, huge benefit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right on. And Tynan, because this is a show about food startups, and Tynan I mentioned Cruise Sheet, but he's started a lot of businesses and is well connected in Silicon Valley and has a lot of entrepreneurial friends. So I wanted to, based on your experience, if you could tell us some bad business habits that you've noticed in startups and how you think they can be changed. Sure.
I think like the biggest one that you see, especially in Silicon Valley or in San Francisco, is you see people really focusing a lot on the superficial parts of the business and not the important part. So people like to talk about their business and they like to go to networking events and they like to, make cool logos and design a beautiful website. And you don't get the sense that a lot of them have the passion for actually building the product. And people that I know who are most successful in tech startups or other startups actually are the people who just have a real passion for the product, and everything else is sort of, well, I guess I have to do this just so I can get back to coding or, building whatever it is I'm working on. And, I don't know if there's a specific habit that can be used to fix that. I think a lot of it, there's certain habits that are best combated with awareness. And, it's important to realize that not every hour you spend on your startup or your work is equally valuable. And, sometimes it feels that way. It's like, well, I've worked 8 hours, so I'm doing a good thing. But, were those 8 hours spent on the biggest problem you have, or were they spent on the easiest thing to do that gives you like a little ego boost, but doesn't actually move the ball forward? So I think that's a big one. Another one, this may be a little controversial, but I think it's crazy that people take weekends off personally. I think in general, when you do a habit every single day, no matter what habit it is, it's a lot easier to stick with. You don't have to, switch your mind frame. And so I think the way I've worked for years and the way a lot of people I know work is you work 7 days a week and, you cut that down to be some manageable amount per day, whether that's 15 hours a day or 6 hours a day. I think the habit of working on your business every single day is a really valuable one. I see a lot of people doing that and I do it myself and I've gotten a lot out of that.
Well, great. Now, to finish up here, we've talked about a lot of great things today, but can you leave the listeners with any other tips on physical and mental health that they may not have considered that we haven't talked about today?
Sure. Well, I think a lot of it we've kind of touched on. I think that, consistency is the really important thing. I think that keeping it simple is really just like a major shortcut. It's like, instead of doing a million different supplements and having a really complicated workout routine and measuring every little macro, it's like, hey, eat the same thing every day if you have to, or have a few standard meals that you hit up. Come up with a 30-minute or a 45-minute workout, and whether it's once a week or 3 times a week, stick to that. I see a lot of people get in these cycles of like taking medicine, and they've got like these side effects and their immune system doesn't build up. And the people I know, including myself, who just never take medicine, we never get sick either. It's like you get a cold, you get over it really quickly and you move on. I think that another big one is setting up your environment so that the easiest thing for you to do is stay healthy and stay productive. So, if you were to look at my place in Vegas right now, I have a really nice tea room that I've set up. I have a really nice office that I've set up, and I don't really have much besides that. And so it's just very easy for me to wake up in the morning, I have my tea, I relax a little bit, and then I get in the office and I work all day. And so I think, that's just another example of keeping it simple, where it's like, my options are the things that are going to move me in the right direction. And a lot of times when I see people kind of getting, stumbling or getting in a rut, it seems to me like they've just made their life too complicated. They've given themselves way too many options, and they could really just cut that down and make life easy and more productive, be in a better mental state, and be in better physical shape.
Right on. All right, Tynan. Well, listen, man, great episode, and best of luck with all of your projects.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening, and as always, if you have any questions or comments, find us online at foodstartupspodcast.com.